Is this real life? I feel crazy. The world is spinning around me. What's happening? You have 4 eyes. I have 2 fingers.
In the music industry, talent opens doors, but access decides who survives. And access is never free, because access isn't just opportunity, it's proximity. Proximity to power, to influence, to rooms most people never see. Long before headlines, before documentaries, before federal filings and public scrutiny, there were rooms, private rooms, closed-door conversations, gatekeepers deciding who rises and who disappears. Inside those rooms, careers could accelerate overnight, or stall without explanation. And sometimes, inside those same rooms, were young stars, still teenagers, navigating environments built by adults with far more leverage than guidance. They were told it was mentorship, exposure, a blessing. But proximity in this industry has always functioned like currency, and youth has often been the most valuable asset in the room. This isn't about social media rumors. It's not about recycled accusations. It's about structure, about systems that reward silence, about influence that protects itself. Because systems don't collapse in a single moment. They don't announce their flaws. They reveal themselves slowly, through patterns, through repetition, through the same dynamics resurfacing across generations. And when you rewind the timeline, when you look at who had power, who had access, and who didn't yet understand the cost of either, the story becomes less about individuals and more about the machine they were standing inside.
Wherever you want to go. Where are we going?
So check this out, yo. Justin, you ever seen the movie 48 Hours? Right now, he's having 48 hours with Diddy, him and his boy. They're having the times of their lives, where we hanging out and what we doing. We can't really disclose, but it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream. I have been given custody of him,
And if you follow that machine back to its most influential architects, one name keeps appearing at the center of the room. Sean Diddy Combs. For decades, he wasn't just an artist. He was a gatekeeper, a curator of access, a figure who could transform proximity into superstardom. Before Justin Bieber ever stepped into that orbit, another teenage star had already passed through it. Usher. Usher has publicly acknowledged entering Diddy's world at a young age, describing an environment that was fast, adult, and far removed from anything resembling normal adolescence. At the time, it was framed as opportunity, mentorship, exposure to greatness. Years later, history repeated itself, this time with Justin Bieber, a global sensation before he was old enough to legally drive, surrounded by executives, managers, investors, and powerful figures who understood exactly what his image, his talent, and his youth were worth. The connection wasn't random. It followed a familiar path: talent discovered, custody transferred, access granted. And once again, a teenager found himself inside rooms built by adults who controlled the tempo of his career. When the same corridor of power appears across generations, it stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like structure.
Is this real life? I feel crazy. The world is spinning around me. What's happening? You have 4 eyes. I have 2 fingers.
The 48-hour clip re-examined there's a video that never disappeared. It didn't leak. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't buried behind court documents or private archives. It aired publicly. It circulated online. It was reposted, quoted, memed. And for years, it was treated as harmless entertainment. In the clip, Sean Diddy Combs appears relaxed, charismatic, in control of the frame. Beside him is a teenage Justin Bieber, young, smiling, eager. The tone feels playful. The energy feels spontaneous, but context is everything. At the time, the narrative was simple: a powerful mogul spending time with a rising star. Mentorship, opportunity, access. The industry framed it as a blessing. But when you revisit the clip now, without background music, without nostalgia, without the shield of celebrity culture, something shifts. The language lands differently. The jokes stretch longer than they should. The references feel coded. There's repeated emphasis on 48 hours, on private time, on undisclosed activities. And when phrases like, "we can't really disclose," are delivered with laughter, the room laughs with them. Because humor has a unique function in power structures. It diffuses tension, it blurs boundaries. It allows something to be said and immediately shielded from scrutiny. If you question it, you're told you're overthinking. If you raise concern, you're told it's just jokes. That's how normalization works, not through overt statements, through repetition wrapped in charm. Watch the body language. One figure controls the rhythm of the conversation, interrupts, redirects, frames the narrative. The other follows, responds, laughs, mirrors energy. This isn't about accusing anyone of a specific act. It's about examining atmosphere. Because environments communicate power long before actions do. And in that clip, the imbalance is subtle but visible. At age difference, industry hierarchy, career leverage, one man at the height of influence, one teenager at the beginning of global fame. That dynamic alone demands careful boundaries. Yet what stands out most isn't what was said, it's what was implied and how easily it was accepted. The audience laughed. Interviewers smiled. Media outlets embedded the footage without commentary. No major think pieces, no serious panel discussions, no mainstream questioning of appropriateness. Why? Because in that era, proximity to power was aspirational. If a mogul took interest in you, it meant you were chosen. If you were invited into private spaces, it meant you were special. The industry didn't see a teenager navigating adult environments. It saw a success story accelerating. And acceleration makes people uncomfortable with slowing down to ask questions. There's also another factor, celebrity insulation. When powerful figures control access to artists, interviews, collaborations, and advertising dollars, mainstream outlets tread carefully. No one wants to jeopardize relationships. No one wants to risk being cut off from exclusives. So moments that deserve deeper examination are categorized as entertainment, and entertainment rarely receives scrutiny unless it explodes. Years passed. The clip aged. The tone of the culture changed. Conversations about safeguarding minors in entertainment evolved. Suddenly, when revisited, the same footage feels heavier, not because the pixels changed, but because awareness did. What once sounded like playful bravado now echoes with imbalance. What once looked like mentorship now raises structural questions. Was there proper supervision? Were boundaries clearly defined? Who was responsible for protecting a teenager in rooms filled with adults who held career power? Those questions weren't asked then, and that absence is part of the story. Because silence doesn't just protect individuals, it protects systems. If the media had paused, if interviewers had pressed, if executives had publicly clarified safeguards, the atmosphere would have shifted. Instead, the moment was archived under celebrity culture, and celebrity culture has a habit of disguising power dynamics as personality quirks. The laughter in the clip becomes the shield, the charisma becomes the cover, the success story becomes the distraction. But when you slow it down, frame by frame, you're not watching scandal. You're watching hierarchy. You're watching how influence presents itself casually, how youth adapts quickly to adult energy, how humor erases the instinct to question. And maybe the most unsettling part isn't what might have happened off camera. It's how comfortable everyone seemed on camera. Comfortable enough not to challenge it. Comfortable enough not to investigate it. Comfortable enough to call it normal. That comfort is the atmosphere. And atmosphere is where systems reveal themselves. Quietly. Because long before legal scrutiny, long before documentaries, long before public debates, there was already a pattern forming. A pattern of powerful rooms, of young talent, of blurred boundaries framed as opportunity. The 48-hour clip didn't create the story. It exposed the temperature of the room, and sometimes understanding the temperature tells you more than any headline ever could.
How did you get that footage of Diddy?
I figured most journalists would not disclose their sources.
If Sean Combs watches this, what do you think he's going to feel?
Like, wow, this is amazing. I think he's going to say this is the best documentary I've seen in a long time. My favorite villain? I kind of like Diddy.
There are no misconceptions about me.
If the 48-hour clip reveals atmosphere, the timeline reveals structure, because Justin Bieber wasn't the first teenager to enter that circle. Years earlier, before global pop dominance, before stadium tours and Las Vegas residencies, a 13-year-old Usher was introduced to the world of Sean Diddy Combs. At the time, it was framed as an opportunity of a lifetime, a prodigy placed under the guidance of a mogul, a fast track to greatness. When Usher has openly spoken about moving to New York as a teenager to live and train under Diddy's mentorship, a period often referred to as the Flavor Camp era. The name sounded playful, almost harmless, but what he later described was anything but typical adolescence. He spoke about exposure to adult environments, late-night parties, unfiltered access, experiences far beyond what most teenagers encounter. There were no public allegations in those early stories, no legal accusations attached to those recollections, but there was discomfort, and discomfort matters. Because when someone reflects on their teenage years and describes environments that felt overwhelming, hyper-adult, and chaotic, that reflection becomes data, not scandal, not proof of wrongdoing, but evidence of atmosphere. Mentorship, in its purest form, is structured, protective, guided. It has boundaries, clear supervision, defined roles, but leverage operates differently. Leverage thrives on proximity, on exclusivity, on making the young talent feel chosen. The distinction between mentorship and leverage isn't always loud. It's often subtle. Mentorship builds skill, leverage builds dependency. When Usher described that era, he didn't frame it as criminal, but he did acknowledge that it was intense, that he saw things a young teenager probably shouldn't see. The industry didn't pause to evaluate that admission. And there was no broad identified once. Why repeat the same model? If a teenage artist previously described overwhelming adult exposure, why not redesign the system before placing another teenager inside it? The industry knew the optics. It knew the environment. It knew the imbalance of power between a global mogul and a 14-year-old artist. And yet the corridor remained unchanged. That's where coincidence begins to fade. When one teenager experiences hyper-adult exposure under a powerful mentor, it can be dismissed as unique circumstances. When another teenager enters the same orbit under the same structure, it starts to resemble design. Again, this is not about accusing specific acts. It's about examining repetition, because systems reveal themselves through repetition. The same gatekeeper. See, the same pattern of early proximity, the same framing of privilege. What shifts is only the generation. Mentorship should evolve. It should learn from past discomfort. It should strengthen boundaries. But leverage resists evolution. Leverage depends on keeping the hierarchy intact. And hierarchy thrives when young talent believes access equals protection. The uncomfortable reality is that both Usher and Bieber became global successes, which makes questioning the pipeline feel almost taboo. After all, the results were profitable, but profit doesn't erase structure. It often reinforces it, because if the formula creates stars, the formula rarely gets challenged. And that's the pivot point. This isn't about two isolated stories. It's about a recurring dynamic. Teenage talent entering adult power structures under the banner of mentorship, with limited visible safeguarding. When you zoom out, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. First Usher, then Bieber. Different eras, same corridor of power. And when the same structure produces similar tension across generations, the question stops being personal. It becomes systemic. If discomfort was identified once, why was the structure preserved? Because when a model benefits the powerful, it rarely gets dismantled voluntarily. Power structure has an outsider, someone close enough to observe the temperature of the room, but distant enough not to depend on it. In this story, that figure has long been 50 Cent. His tension with Sean Diddy Combs isn't new. It stretches back years. Interviews, jokes, subliminal comments, public jabs. For a long time, it was categorized neatly. Industry rivalry, competitive ego, marketing strategy. Hip-hop has always normalized conflict as performance. So when 50 Cent questioned Diddy's character or lifestyle publicly, it was absorbed into that tradition. Just another feud, just another headline. But here's where perception becomes complicated, because sometimes when a critic has a history of confrontation, it becomes easy to dismiss everything they say. If the messenger is controversial, the message feels less credible. That dynamic worked for years. When 50 Cent made remarks about Diddy's private world, many treated it as trolling, as humor, as clout. The narrative was simple. He's just taking shots. But narratives are fragile. They hold until external pressure forces reevaluation. And when legal scrutiny enters the frame, when federal investigations, indictments, and courtroom filings begin to surface, old statements begin to age differently. Not automatically validated, not magically transformed into proof, but recontextualized. What once sounded like rivalry now sounds like warning. That shift is subtle. The words didn't change, the environment did. Timing matters. When 50 Cent began amplifying his commentary again, aligning it with documentary production and public discourse, it didn't land the same way it once did. Because now, there was an institutional backdrop. Legal process doesn't prove every public claim, but it changes how seriously people take questions. The audience recalibrates, and that's where the credibility debate begins. Was he genuinely signaling concern for years, or strategically capitalizing on long-standing tension? Both can exist simultaneously. Rivalry and awareness aren't mutually exclusive. In industries built on image, critics are often marginalized until the system itself starts cracking. History shows a pattern. Outsider voices are easiest to ignore when the structure is stable. They become harder to dismiss when institutions start investigating. And that's the uncomfortable middle ground. Because dismissing someone as a rival doesn't automatically invalidate their observations. But accepting them as prophetic doesn't automatically validate their motives either. The question isn't whether 50 Cent was right about everything. It's whether the industry used rivalry as a convenient shield to avoid examining uncomfortable dynamics. For years, his commentary was filtered through personality. He's antagonistic. He's strategic. He's building narrative. All of that may be true, but what if some of his remarks were rooted in proximity to behavior that felt off? That possibility was easier to laugh at when the system appeared intact. It's harder to laugh now, because once legal scrutiny tightens, once institutions take formal steps, the cultural temperature shifts. And when temperature shifts, so does credibility. This doesn't mean every outsider becomes a whistleblower. It means context changes weight. The same sentence can feel like gossip in one era and foresight in another. The deeper issue isn't about picking sides between two moguls. It's about how power structures respond to internal critics. Do they investigate the substance or attack the source? If criticism is automatically framed as jealousy, the system protects itself. If criticism is evaluated independently of personality, the system evolves. For years, the easier option was dismissal. Now, dismissal feels less stable, and that's where the messenger credibility debate becomes central. Not because rivalry disappears, but because when institutions enter the picture, old warnings no longer exist in isolation. They exist in context, and context is what turns noise into signal.
You understand? You got people in the industry that's been saying for years, this man is having sex with underage. So now the federal government is looking at that like, yo, when is somebody gonna come forward? We got this information, this alleged information, but nobody's willing to come forward. Then they go on and say, yo, Shakur Stewart mysteriously dead. Supposed to be a self-inflicted wound. Person that had everything going for them in their life. Kim Porter dead. Somebody's car gets blown up. This guy is walking around threatening other actors, people. Somebody got to get involved in it. If it ain't the state, let it be the feds. Somebody got to stop him. He lucky that God given him the opportunity to be stopped while he's alive, then have to go to hell and face that shit. He got a chance to repent now, change his life.
You mentioned minors, you know, and a lot of people have been trying to drag Justin Bieber into this situation because there's a lot of like suspect looking videos with Diddy and Bieber in it, and you know, they're making a lot of allegations.
You know, Diddy bought his son a Bentley. Maybe, you know, he could buy you one also.
Got me a Lamborghini. And
Yeah. Oh, well, that's nice.
I haven't gotten it yet, though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. When is that coming, that Lamborghini? We talked about this last
He
time.
had the Lamborghini for a day or two, and he had access to the house, and he knows better than to be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television.
Well, apparently not.
Something, everything ain't for everybody.
Do you believe the guy in the tape is white?
If he's bigger than Diddy, and he's not none of the names that I said, probably so. But then they say he was young too.
Yeah, they say he was young.
Let me get his name right. I hope it ain't the Bieber. I hope it's not the Bieber.
That's a good one. It might be him. But if they saying that the guy is young and he's an A-lister, I can't think of that many black people, man.
Right, not at all. And somebody that's more powerful, more of a celebrity than Diddy. You understand what I'm saying? If they were saying somebody that was more celebrity than Diddy, he was an A-lister, he was younger. You know what I'm saying? And if he's not black, it would have to be the Bieber. That's his name, Bieber? They said I got that wrong too. Justin Bieber, allegedly. I don't know, bro.
Right. But when you heard the news that Diddy, he had a tape with another man, did that catch you by surprise or no?
Well, all this shit is by surprise to me. A lot of this shit is by surprise to me, to be totally honest, man. Because I knew Puff, I knew Puff Dad, I knew Diddy before he was Love and Brother Love and back to Diddy. So, no, but the diddler, he's the diddler now. A lot of it's surprising, but it's not unheard of. Because you hear of all kinds of shit, and whether it registered with you or you internalize it or something like that, that's a whole nother story. But a lot of this stuff is crazy. But this is the world that we live in now, man. That these individuals thinks is all right. Bruh, when does it comes all right to be sitting there eating food off a naked woman? When did we start doing what they do? Let's keep it a buck. When did we start doing what they do? These guys is popping pills. These got Jay-Z dancing with a chick that's